Alright, so Gemini 3.1 just dropped, and today we're checking out what people have been able to do with this model that they couldn't with others, plus the summary from the Gemini team itself. Now, it has to be said that the document Gemini put out about the 3.1 Pro doesn't really tell us much about the program itself. We've seen negative takes on the program, and we've also seen very positive ones about this new LLM. So we're going to be looking at all of them, obviously. Welcome to this video. Thanks so much for being here, and let's dive in. All right, they explained that last week they rolled out a general update for Gemini 3 Deep Think to tackle modern problems in science, research, engineering, and that today they're releasing Gemini 3.1 Pro. It's now available on Google AI Studio CLI and all kinds of platforms related to Google. So basically, they highlight us in the benchmarks here, which we have to take with a grain of salt, and we'll see examples later, don't worry, of how this new model actually works, not just through benchmarks, but they point out that compared to Gemini 3 Pro, the Gemini 3.1 has the ARC AGI2, which is a benchmark that evaluates the model's ability to solve logic patterns. It scores 77.1%, while Gemini 3 Pro, the thinking, was at 31.1%, beating all other models currently on the market. Some people have joked about that question well, there are several questions like that have become famous that people ask AI to make fun of it. So here's one example. I walk 4 steps north, 4 steps east, 4 steps west, and 4 steps south, and I end up in the same spot. I see a bear. What color is the bear? In other words, where am I? And many times the model would answer, the bear is white. Okay, why? Because since you've returned to your starting point, which is to the north, where we started, right? With 4 steps north, well, you're pointing to the North Pole and it's white. Then, look, it's true, the answer is a bit ChatGPT G5. 2 also responded the same way. And then we have the response from Gemini 3.1 Pro Preview that tells us exactly. It says, the bear could be any color, brown, black, etc., depending on what part of the world you're in. But what we can confirm is that, of course, you walked 4 steps north, which means you're not in the north, because otherwise, if you were at the exact point of the North Pole, you wouldn't be able to walk 4 steps north. Just nonsense. Claude's Sonnet 4.6, for example, also does it. Well, we've seen some improvements in scientific knowledge, right? Almost 2 points. In Terminal Bench, which also focuses on, well, the agentic terminal, it's also improved some points, but it's nothing remarkable compared to GPT 5.3 Codex and others. But that's the only improvement they're highlighting, right? I mean, they don't tell us anything else beyond what they're showing us, right? But we also see that agentic search has improved a ton, okay? The search capability has improved, wow, almost, well, 25 points, 26. And here they give us a few examples of what 3.1 is designed for. He says it's designed for tasks where a simple answer isn't enough. It takes advantage of advanced reasoning to make it more useful for your toughest challenges. And here they give us some examples. We're going to see what the community has done because they've done some really interesting things like illustrations with SVG, right? Where it's showing us, as we can see, SVG animations comparing Gemini 3 Pro and Gemini 3.1 Pro. There's clearly a difference. They also show us Canvas, and we're going to see the crazy stuff people have done with it because honestly, it's incredible. And here, well, it creates a little world map with an ISS tracker, okay? Then here we have a bird simulation and then, well, web pages. We're going to see all this from people who've tried it, not necessarily from them. And funny enough that they haven't told us anything else, so check this out. They just dropped an amazing model we're about to explore. Look, for example, here I asked it to create an SVG animation of, well, I don't know, the Google logo being drawn, and this is what it gave me right here. This is what it generated. Well, it's not that great, honestly. Then I tried using the same prompt they showed us with that box assembly, and there I have the animation of the box falling, assembling, and then the check mark. Not that impressive either. I've also seen some complaints from people who tried Gemini 3.1 Pro complaining it thinks too much, same issue we saw with ChatGPT. When you use multiple agents, it just gets slower, right? All that back and forth between them. But after digging into this for a bit, here's what the first more surface level criticisms. I've started seeing things I really liked, so let's dive right in and I'll show you. Check out this project here. User light_velox on r singularity posted this exploration game project. The guy says, it wasn't a one-shot, took about 20 prompts, but the first ones were fixing bugs, changing the ship's shape and model, and improving the controls. I don't know if the user made it with Google AI Studio, or with Canvas. Let's see, looking at the interface a bit, well, we can see it looks incredible. Just look at how it loads the world and everything. It really looks like they made it with Canvas, right? I'm not gonna lie. Looking at everything, the ship can shoot and all that. And if you think this is impressive, just wait, because another user appeared here, glittering_neck in the same singularity saying, well, I was using Gemini, Canvas and all that, and I was playing with the sound. And look what I did with Canvas's own sound, right? Look what he did. He made an initial animation for the game itself. Then he started looking into the SVG stuff, okay? This is ultimately Canvas or code and all that. We had been shown some SVGs. Oops, looks pretty bad, doesn't it? Some sample SVGs here, but then new ones like this were generated, okay? Now we're talking about more advanced stuff. I want you to understand that, of course, the prompt here is sold to us as generate an animated SVG of a frog on a vintage penny farthing bicycle. Look, I've seen people trying it, and well, I haven't seen these results, okay? I haven't seen them. I mean, I've seen them, but not with just a prompt, okay? We have to be honest about that too. Also, since they don't tell us what interface they use or anything, I saw this user who posted this with the prompt, make an SVG animation of a building being constructed. Time 270 seconds. Use 27,000, I assume, tokens. And there's the animation where it just builds the building and everything. This is all an animation, right? That it programmed with code and renders it this way. I mean, incredible, incredible. Then I saw a user comparing Gemini 3.1 Pro for web design with, careful now, Claude's Opus 4.6. Well, the responses to this comment or this post are pretty negative, okay? In the sense that, well, many people still prefer Opus 4.6 or say the design of both is terrible and so on. It's true that with creative stuff, people get very defensive, but we're going to form our own opinion, right? Obviously. So we're going to compare the first two images. The first is Opus 4.6 and the second is Gemini 3.1 Pro High, okay? This one is Opus 4.6. We're seeing, well, the usual stuff, same fonts, same blocks. It works for making a landing page, and honestly, it's just, I mean, it has the same structure as any page made with AI and all that. And if we go to the 3.1, well, more of the same. I mean, it's true that the background of the sections it doesn't divide them like Opus 4.6 does, which isn't crazy either. The fonts seem really boring to me, but honestly, it's not a bad page, you know? I mean, a page like this could sell just as well as a super colorful artistic one. I've seen many people in the comments complain about web design, but what makes a site sell isn't the artistic design itself, it's where the button is. For example, on both pages we see there's only one button, which is a good thing, and also, well, in the case of Gemini 3.1, they're centered. Look, I'm no expert either, but it's true that, for example, with Opus, the orange button we're seeing here at the start is the only thing that stands out. Things that would be better than, say, in Gemini 3, right? Because here, for example, we have two orange elements, so the user has to choose which one to read first. On the other hand, if we go to a website and something really catches our attention, like the buy button, and we want the user to make a purchase, well, the user's subconscious will see that first and think, okay, I know where to buy, but here we're not Oh, sorry. In this other design, we wouldn't make it so easy for them. But anyway, the most important thing about a website, more than the style itself, is that both work fine. I mean, I'd say the second one, the Gemini 3.1, I like it less. It's what's on the site and how the information is laid out. Now let's look at the others, the other two. Okay, same thing again. Opus 4.6, stop. Wasting time on tasks a machine could do. Well, here I see a huge space. I get it. I mean, I understand why. I get the reason. And it's basically so the user in full screen has to scroll and all that. But oof, I do think it's a bit worse, you know? This one. Now this is a bit more horrible, huh? But anyway, we'd have a page here and then we'd have this other one. More of the same, I think. I mean, this second one, I'd say Gemini wins, okay? And it's quite a bit better aesthetically and all, but leaves much to be desired. I think here there are many touches missing, the text they give. Doesn't make you want to read it. I don't know if it's because I'm seeing it too small and all. But anyway, is it an improvement over Opus 4.6? Well, more than an improvement, it's an alternative. I'd also like to see what prompt was used to generate the image and all. But really, generating an image with a single prompt at once, the only thing it'll do with LLMs is give you a generic image, that's it. I mean, but it's obvious, right? Alright, let's move on to something more impressive. You know I'm taking you up and down, right? We started by going down with those critiques, then went up with those spaceships and video games, then back down, and now we're going back. So here we have a user who says they tried to make an operating system, right? Obviously just the interface part. And here it is. Obviously this is something a lot of people were asking for, right? Well, we can see here that all the applications are stacked on top of each other, which is just okay, right? But what we're seeing is that, well, back then in AI Studio, in the AI Studio build interface, tons of people were asking for an interface to be generated. In fact, we did it ourselves to test how it worked or whether the model worked decently and all that. So what happens? When lots of people ask for something, the model tends to prioritize that generation more. It trains more on that specific output based on what users keep requesting and so on. And that's also why you can just say like, generate me an operating system, and right off the bat it creates, well, the clock, a browser, a file explorer, etc. Even so, I have to say it's pretty impressive. I mean, as you can see, it doesn't actually open the files or anything because in the end all this is visual. It's not functional as such. But if we move forward a bit, it could even open. It had a calendar and it also had a paint, right? There it is. It's got a functional paint and everything, which I'd love to know how long he waited for all this to generate and so on. Here we have an example from another user who compared Gemini 3 Pro with the 3 Pro 3.1. I understand this is the generation, whether it's from a field or not. I don't know how he generated this. I have no idea. But, well, clearly the 3.1 gives much more detail, more shading, and so on. We also have this example from a user who generated a canvas showing a tree growing through its different phases. It looks pretty good, looks pretty good. And the prompt is, create an interactive interface with animation showing a seed being planted and growing into a full tree. Well, obviously this is pretty rough, and there he defines the steps. This can be improved a lot, especially the prompt, okay? And then finally, here's a guy who created an isometric scene using only SVG. This one took it a bit further, using Gemini 3.1 Pro. Obviously, he didn't generate it on the first try. He had to iterate. But what he confirms is that everything was generated with Gemini 3.1 Pro. And let's take a look at how incredible what he generated is, which looks super, super interesting, right? I mean, the whole interface looks pretty cool and all. Obviously, when we get into more complex programs, like with everything, AI is just an additional tool for our work. What does that mean? That when we start looking for very specific things, our own knowledge about how to create those specific things becomes really valuable. Why? Because when there's an error, which is where we really start having problems, our ability to solve that error is what actually matters in determining whether we'll be able to fix it or not. So if I tell the AI to make me a bag of tomatoes, it'll make me a bag of tomatoes. But if the AI fails and doesn't understand what I'm asking, I'm going to have to be the one to make it understand. And that's the really complicated part. But anyway, we're seeing that fundamentally, theoretically, Gemini 3.1 Pro is a somewhat superior model, especially with SVG stuff, which is what they've shown. I don't think it's better at programming. I don't think so. It's also true that I should mention that I really didn't like that, for example, in Google Antigravity or many models that use the Gemini environment, suddenly from one moment to the next, they force you to use Gemini 3.1 Pro, taking away Gemini 3, which smells a bit fishy, right? I mean, why? Why are you forcing me to use the Gemini 3 model? Is it because that Mini 3.1 Pro is incredibly better and using Gemini 3 would be a waste of time? I don't think so. Or is it because Gemini 3.1 Pro is better optimized, has lower cost than Gemini 3? And that's why you're forcing me to use Gemini 3.1, Gemini 3.1. Well, that makes a lot more sense. That makes a lot more sense, right? It's better at, and is the model more cost effective? Well, we'll have to see about that. Right now, we're seeing that people are doing some really cool things. Of course, for everyday use, we'll have to see. I mean, I've already seen people complaining about daily use, that it takes longer to think, and that's possible. It might use less or run slower because it's so focused on optimizing and using as few tokens as possible that it might take 3 times as long, you know? But as a conclusion, it's pretty cool, okay? In conclusion, it's a good model, but we'll have to see. We'll have to see how it keeps developing and what it brings us in the future. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you liked all these updates I've brought you, and well, see you later. All right, so with the release of Gemini 3.1 Pro, many of us ran into an issue where Google AI Studio wouldn't let us use the previous model, okay? We'd go in here wanting to use Gemini 3 and we couldn't. It told us to use Pro instead. And what happened? When we tried to use Pro, it said our version wasn't available. This might have happened now or could happen later when a new model drops, which is why I'm making this video on how to fix it. Sure, lots of people say, it's easy to update Google AI Studio, just uninstall it and reinstall it. But what happens? You'd lose your past conversations and settings and all that. So how do we do this without losing everything? Pretty simple, actually. Just search for Google AI Studio, click Get on the official page, and run the official file you download. What will Google AI Studio do? It'll overwrite the old version without deleting your settings. And so there you have it. That simple. Hope this was helpful. Bye-bye. All right. And finally, it looks like along with the Gemini 3.1 Pro update, an update for Google Antigravity also came out on February 21st, okay? That many of us have had to update and all that. So what does this update bring us? Well, this update that came out here, we have an update on February 19th and another on February 20th. This little update tells us, first, the February 19th one says fixes. A problem was resolved where external plugins could fail and such. Well, some bugs that have been fixed. And let's go to the improvements section, which is the cool part. We now have Gemini 3.1 Pro available. Models and configurations have been added, giving more visibility to model quota usage. A setting has been added to enable or disable terminal interaction. Support has been added for downloading artifacts from the chat interface. You can now use arrow keys to navigate the input box story, just a small detail, and the chat interaction interface has been improved. The improvements are minor, but they've rolled out Gemini 3.1 across all models, okay? Gemini 3.1 high-low, and they've kept Gemini 3 Flash. So yeah, not much else. They've also removed Claude Sonnet 4.5 and Claude Opus 4.5 thinking. They didn't announce it, but they took them away. And that's about it. This is the update. Nothing more, really. So, does Gemini 3.1 Pro work better? It works well. I mean, honestly, I haven't used Google AI Studio enough to really tell the difference between models, but Gemini 3 compared to 3.1 Pro does have a pretty noticeable difference with SVG files and programming, especially in visual areas. You know, we haven't been able to test the logic side much, so we'll have to try that out. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this. See you in the next videos for sure. Link in the description if you want to learn how to optimize your time, your workspace, work better and more efficiently with AI. Bye bye.